human population is very special and important to us because we are humans. And so we have a certain study of humans that's called demography. And when you say demography, you're always talking about just humans. You're not talking about animals, you're not talking about plants. You're always talking about humans when you hear the word demography. So, human populations have changed over time on the earth. So, early known numbers of population size stayed the same for thousands of years as best as we know it. It grew a little bit at times, but really it was fairly steady for thousands and thousands of years. And in what your book is calling the modern age, which is where the industrial revolution starts, this is where the human population experienced an exponential growth. And during that time, we had people come into like cities, start specializing in things. There was better uh, ranching and processing of animals and farming and trading of goods and creating housing for people that made it so that they could live in a small space but still get the resources that they need. So all of these things contributed. I need to mention medicines and increase in education that all played into humans having this exponential growth here. Humans uh, in developed countries tend to have in developed countries they have a better chance at getting things that they need when they're sick. They have better hospitals, they have better vaccines, they have better medicines and care. So if you had an underdeveloped country, a country that did not have very many resources, versus a developed country that has a lot of resources. The United States is a good example of a country that's a developed country and has a lot of resources. If you lived in an underdeveloped country, why would it be harder even today to survive? You're probably not vaccinated from and so illness can pass through the population faster. With people not being vaccinated, not access to good medicine or medical care, you can have less food, sometimes worse nutrition, not as good of education. All of those are going to affect people in underdeveloped countries. So I want to skip ahead and move to trends in human population. So when there has been a shift in human population trends. That's called a demographic transition. I want you to pay attention to this sentence particularly because it's very interesting. Presently, the birth rate in the United States has decreased dramatically, and the life expectancy is greater than 70 years. So, right now, people are not having as many kids as they used to, and people are living longer. Um, this is a change here. It continues on the change. This change in the population from high birth, when people used to have a lot of kids, and they used to maybe die sooner. So when there's a change in demographics, that's called a demographic transition. And here is some basically demographic or some human population trends over time of things that happened to humans. So I want you to pay a lot of attention to this graph. It's very interesting to me. Afghanistan, for instance, is a country. This is population growth rates of different countries. For every one person that's alive in this generation in Afghanistan, they're going to have 2.63 people replace them. So they are growing very, very quickly. And then over here, there are countries like Brazil that are growing slower. The United States is on here. We are also growing very slowly. We're not quite, a zero would mean that for every person that, a zero would be that for every person that is alive now, one person will replace them. So on this line would be like a no net growth. But you can see that we are actually having a very slow growth, and so is Brazil. But something like Afghanistan, Nigeria, Kenya, they're growing very, very quickly. These countries like Bulgaria and Germany that are below the line are actually shrinking in their population size. You can Japan is another country that could be added here, where the population is actually decreasing. There's this graph that shows you in Kenya, here's how many people are 80 to 100 years old, with the women in the orange and the men in the green. And then look at the growth. Look at how many 0 to 4-year-olds they have in their population compared to older people. We in the United States, we actually have a pretty large, healthy 80 to 100-year-old population, more women than men, interestingly. And then we have a lot of people in that this band is the reproductive age. They can still have kids. We have a decent amount, and not very many youth and coming up. I mean, just about the same amount. We aren't growing like Kenya. And Germany, you can see, is actually shrinking. So this is called an age structure graph. And an age structure graph basically shows the number of males on the left here, the number of women on the right, and how many there are in each age group in a country. What would happen if you had exponential growth in a human population? What would happen? It would look like this graph in Kenya to have exponential growth, but obviously it's going to be very hard to get resources that you need. You're going to have to work very hard to make sure there's enough food, housing, medicine, care, education to take care of all of those people. So there are some differences in the age structure. You can see at different points, there's more women than men. In the United States, sometimes there's more men than women. Like in the United States, between 20 and 24, there's more men than women in our country. So that is how that graph works. The carrying capacity for humans, we don't know for sure what the carrying capacity is for humans. As time has gone on, we've gotten more and more and more efficient at using resources. Sometimes we use too many resources. Here's how many resources per human we use. In the United States, we need about 12 acres, or no, hectares. That's even bigger of land per person to take care of each of us. That's how much land we need to survive. Whereas in India, they're floating at about one hectare of land per person is all they need to survive. So somewhere, even if you are not living on 12 hectares of land for each person in your family, there is 12 hectares of land somewhere in the world that is basically supporting you using, getting all the fuel you need for your cars and clothing and food and etc. So we actually tend to use a ton of resources, whereas like Germany, Brazil, Indonesia uses a whole lot less resources per person. So what is the carrying capacity of the Earth for humans? Nobody really knows this. As we get more efficient over time, though, which we are, and learning how to use less and live on less and be more efficient, then we can support more humans and put less of a toll on the earth. So that's all that we are going to talk about today. One other point, because it's in your book and you'll need to know this. If you have a population that is really close together, it's very dense in an area, and there's a new disease that breaks out. If you live in a very dense area, obviously the disease can spread a lot faster than if you were further apart. So anyways, I am going to let you go, and I hope you have a great day.